Yeah,
Nice.
I made it iced.
Yeah.
That's the level we've gone to today.
Yeah, well, it's getting hotter outside.
It is getting hotter outside.
What are you doing?
I'm flexing my brain muscles, trying to wake them up.
I don't think that's how it works.
You serious?
No?
No,
Well, how does it work, Mertz? Why don't you
well,
why don't you
I think squinching your face will only, it warms up your face muscles. I don't know if it really connects the brain. I mean, it is connecting the
I'm
brain to the
my
muscle.
brain has to tell the muscle
Yeah.
to
So
do some work.
yeah. Okay. So maybe that's kind of like a warm up. You
Yeah.
just woke up, just crawl out of bed, just sit there, flex your base muscles and kind of start from there. And then you start, getting your shoulders,
warming up for the
you
podcast.
know. Oh,
Speaking of which, isn't that why we're here? Hey
oh,
guys.
we are.
Yeah, I'm Coach Tanya,
I'm Coach Mertz.
and this is Affiliate Soapbox.
Yeah.
Ding.
Yeah. So we're talking about the brain muscle connection today. And why is it important?
Well, the brain is what tells the muscles to do the work.
Do the work, Don.
So if those two things aren't connected, we're going to have some problems. I mean, there might be some of my problem this morning, and there's a little bit of connection misfire going on.
I think that's kind of been me all week. Like I'll wake up, if I have any classes going in the morning, I try to get a workout in. I'm just like, I just want to get on a rower and just row.
And not think about it.
And not think about anything because look, we went through the open, open is always tough mentally, physically, especially as owners trying to run everybody through it. So, I kind of needed like more than one deload week. I needed two deload weeks, but,
deload month.
Yeah, deload month, like quarterfinals going on this week. And I'm like, I'm going to do what I can do.
Okay. So what's the difference? So if you're on a rower, do you not need that neurological input? Do you how much less thinking and how much less are you using your brain if you're getting on a rower or just going out on the road and doing some running, right? What's the difference? Are you saying we don't?
Well, I think practice makes perfect. Whether I'm fatigued or not, whether I'm tired or not, I'm still, when I'm on that rower or I'm running or whatever, I'm still paying attention to how my brain is sending signals to my muscle, making sure that I'm getting my timing correctly on my row or I'm squeezing my glute when I'm running, things like that. Because, if we just go out there just with no intent and just do, all right, we just shut our brains off completely and just do, well, inefficiencies happen. We're training our brain not to be efficient, right? We're training our muscles, or I should say our muscles not to be efficient, and efficiency is king.
I think training your brain isn't a wrong phrase that you just use. Last week we had Natalie on the podcast and she talked about mindfulness in movement. And I think that is a different way of talking about the neurological connection and how our body functions as a whole when we're doing activities, when we're moving around, we're doing something intentional as opposed to just being at rest, whether we're asleep or just kind of laying there watching the latest episode of House of the Dragon, whatever it is. Stuff they got going on in that show. Oh God! Really?
What show you said?
House of the Dragon.
Oh yes, yes. Oh yeah. Speaking of,
I know. It's a really great mug for that.
So what's happening here, right? So as our brain is sending signals to our muscles, there's motor recruitment patterns that are happening, right? We're telling, like right now, if I take my arm and bring this up, and I'm squeezing
any excuse for Mertz to flex.
So I'm squeezing this right here. That's my brain sending a signal to my bicep to squeeze.
Okay.
That's just one muscle. When we start,
more than one muscle, but
well, I mean, it's one area of the one grouping of the muscle grouping in that upper arm area, right? Let's not get too technical.
I'm going to pick on you today. Let's just lay out all the different.
But CrossFit isn't just bicep curls. It's cleans, it's wall balls, it's
almost
rowing,
never bicep curls.
It's more than just one grouping of muscles. It's usually compound movements that are happening. It's when we're squatting. When we're squatting, not only do we have to keep our core engaged, we're having to pull down that bar. So now we got shoulder engagement. We're actually squatting, so we hip hinge back. push, hip hinge back. Now we're turning on our hamstrings, our quads and everything, our glutes as we lower ourselves down. Right. And now as we get down to that bottom position, we're again, trying to keep our core braced. As we're standing up, we're applying force to the ground through our legs, through our quads, through our calves, through our glutes, through our hip flexors, through our core, even while we're still holding pressure on the barbell. So it's back squat is a full body movement. So it's not just one grouping of muscles. It's the whole body.
That was easy.
And it also involves a proprioception of where and how am I moving in space,
Yes.
right? Am I at parallel? Am I below parallel? Am I too low? Is my spine, is my lumbar spine now flexing or extending, right? Where
Yeah.
it shouldn't be, instead of being in that neutral spine position. So yes, I mean, I think it's a little bit of not just getting the muscles to move in the right way, but the awareness and building the fact that we don't have mirrors. So you need to be able to feel where you are and to be aware of how you're moving in space, not having that mirror.
And that's what's good about having that coach. If one of the biggest flaws to a lot of people who back squat is you see a hip shift happening. And a hip shift is usually happening because they're not applying force to both feet equally.
Because
right?
you're not paying attention.
You're not paying attention.
There's not enough neurological connection there to what you're doing.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
And I think that's one thing is, we can talk about very scientific terms when we're looking at this brain muscle connection, but just the fact that we need to train our brain to pay more attention, to be more mindful, to take a look at each step of the movement. I don't think you can take really any exercise, not even the rowing or the running, and say, I'm going to be mindless about it. I'm just going to get there. Because when we're tired, when we're not paying attention, when we've got a lot on our mind, that's when we lose that form. We lose the connection there to be telling those muscles to do even just something that we think that we've practiced enough that it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
We start to lose that. That becomes very much not true.
Yeah.
When you haven't had, I think about it when I used to do martial arts and Katrina hit. So I didn't see my martial arts instructor for a better part of 6 months to a year. And I had a black belt at the time. I was great.
I did not know this. You're a black belt. I'm scared now.
You should really start behaving on the podcast, Mertz. That's what I've been hinting at this whole time. But the point is, I was a very high-level martial artist. I've been doing this for several years, and I was practicing on my own. I didn't have a mirror because, we're not out in the. I was in Pennsylvania, in Quakertown, finding places out in the fields to practice some kung fu. And when my instructor finally saw me again, and I'm thinking I'm doing great. I'm under a lot of stress. I'm not taking into account the fact that I've got no one watching me, but I'm under a lot of stress. The city's just completely uninhabitable for a long period of time. We lost everything. So by the time I got back to my instructor thinking, well, at least I practiced and I could still do, a lot of these movements. The first words out of his mouth was, "What? That is not what I taught you. I don't know what you're doing, but that is not Kung Fu."
Ancient Chinese secret.
So even when we think that, without assistance, we are practicing or we're getting it right, without that reminder, without that cue, without someone else's eyes on you, even a higher level athlete or a higher level martial artist, you can very much lose that form and those standards, those points of performance, because you don't have anyone to help you keep that in line.
Well, and we see it a lot as coaches. We go through practice, every movement in the workout we practice beforehand, right? And we're often given cues, corrections, and all of a sudden we can have, fixed flaws during that time is great. But as soon as 3, 2, 1, go happens, what happens? As soon as they start going, everything's out the window.
Heart rate.
Everything you taught them goes out the window, and it happens a lot. One of the biggest one of the biggest movements that I see where this happens is the rower. I mean, we could have somebody perfect on the rower. I say, and all of a sudden, 3, 2, 1, go, and they're not, they're not squeezing their knees all the way down. They're yanking on the chain,
They don't know what's going on.
You have them at a good pace, like 20 to 23 strokes per minute. Now they have 40 strokes per minute. It's like, whoa, what did we not teach you?
But the clock started, Coach.
Yeah. Well,
The guy next to me, the music,
and
that's what happens.
in every movement that we teach is a core to extremity movement. And start all of a sudden, what's happening there is the signal in the brain is now going. Everything we taught is now going out the window, and the signal in the brain is not going core to extremity. Now it's don't worry about the core. Let's just go extremity. Let's just
get to the end point.
Get to the end point as fast as
Right.
possible. Patience is so huge. Any CrossFit movement that it is, patience is a virtue. It doesn't matter what it is. Timing of a movement, like wall balls. So when we do wall ball shots, the timing, we're squeeze our butt before we press the arms and throw overhead. Same with a push jerk, push press. Deadlifts. We don't just get down there and yank on a bar. We actually feel the bar. We take some slack out of the bar. We get them shoulders
create
back.
tension.
Create
right?
tension.
We're not yanking. We're actually creating tension before we move.
And when we're doing these things, we're actually recruiting those motor recruitment patterns to be able to apply force effectively and efficiently.
I think, like, to your original statement of 3, 2, 1, go, everything changes. Part of that is we're so easily distracted. Right? The ability to focus, the ability to concentrate. And that gets missed a lot when we talk about the benefits of fitness, the benefits of CrossFit. It's that training of your brain to concentrate, your ability to keep your attention on that one thing. And we're in a world where they absolutely, whether it's social media, television, being on the interstate, listening to a podcast, there's always something there competing for your attention. And we're in a world where that is more prevalent than ever. You've got everything available on your phone at the same time, while the TV, while the radio is going, while you're on the computer at work, while somebody's talking to you. You might be like surfing the net. So
hold on. There's my phone at.
Exactly. Like,
what's going on today? Were you talking to me?
But I think that, again, that's something that we need to look at further, in that for athletes, we talk about this a lot with masters athletes, improving or preserving that neurological function.
Yeah.
And I see that in a lot of classes. We have some folks that are up in their 70s and 80s. And when you see them start to remember a movement, maybe it's over the course of a couple of weeks, or it might be the course of a class.
Oh,
because there's some athletes, you start them out and you have to remind them all the different steps in setting up and doing the deadlift, or all the different parts of the clean, and that needs to be done slowly. But sometimes an athlete will all of a sudden just improve to the point where there's something clicks, and I'm not reminding that same athlete that this is, what we need to do in the clean. I need to see you fully extend or stand all the way up before we do anything else. And to see that happen without my cue, without my reminder, is a little bit of magic.
Yes, it is magic.
It's fantastic. So just the ability to focus, concentrate outside of everything else that happens afterwards, to try to do the movement correctly is important. It's a huge advantage.
Well, I think a big part of it is that we, in CrossFit, when we 3, 2, 1, go happens, there's a timer. There's a speed element here. We have to go fast. And people will lose that battle of neurological proprioception of their body because the timer is clicking down. And what they don't realize is after 2 minutes, 3 minutes of these irregular movement patterns that we tried to fix in the practice session during the skill session, you're now moving less efficient, and you wonder why you're tiring out 4 to 5 minutes into a 10 to 20 minute workout. Well, it's because you're not moving efficiently. Your energy is being depleted. Without applying the right force production here through each muscle grouping, with each motor recruitment pattern. So if you want to keep, a lot of this is like pacing, right? So a lot of times, a lot of workouts, we might program a pacing element because we want to keep this pace happening. The only way to really to keep a pace happening is by being efficient.
It goes back to the stimulus of the workout.
Yeah.
When we talk about in the beginning of a class, what are we trying to achieve, not only with the overall workout, how should that workout feel, but also with each part of the workout. So if we're looking at a run, 400-meter run, and we tell the class, we want to see this run in an average of 2 minutes. Okay, that gives you an idea of how hard you should push. I'm not asking you to sprint that 400 meters. I'm asking you to run at a pace where you're going to be within that 2-minute window, give or take. And that also gives you an idea of how you might scale that distance. You're like, oh, there's no way I'm running 400 meters. I would have to sprint, and then I'd probably run through the door and collapse and can't do anything else. Then we know we might need to scale that back. Maybe we're only doing 200 meters. Maybe we're pushing to 300 meters, right? So it makes you think about, so the stimulus of the workout itself, and as we explain it as a coach, that actually makes you use your brain more. You're going to
Yeah.
discuss it with the coach, strategize, how do we get the stimulus of this movement, right, without falling apart.
Yeah, right,
Right.
right. And, I think like we'd go through pose running drills, talking about running specifically here, going through pose running drills. One of the things during the pose running drills that we are trying to teach as well is the glute, how to turn the glute on when we're running. When we're propelling ourselves forward, we're not bending over.
No.
We're keeping we're keeping our hips upright, because when you bend over, now you cannot squeeze your glute as effectively as when you're standing up. If I'm standing up, I can squeeze my glutes very well. If I'm sitting down, it's a little bit harder, right? So when we're going through that transfer of force on the ground, we're in our backswing of our leg, we're squeezing that glute. That's what's propelling us forward. Same thing in a back squat. Same thing in a wall ball shot. Our glutes are doing. Look, CrossFit is very hip dominant work.
Yes.
It's the biggest joint on our body. So using that to our effective, and a lot of times we say glute amnesia, right? So
this because we tend to use more quad strength, and that becomes overdeveloped, and we see that a lot. The amount of athletes, when I tell them, okay, if we're doing box step ups, I want you to put your foot on the box, get your heel all the way on the box, and I want you to engage or squeeze that glute as you're bringing yourself up onto the box, and their eyes are just like, wait, what, who? This is something very basic that we should be doing as we're going up steps. We should be recruiting the glute to propel us upwards and forward. But I see predominantly in most beginner and even advanced athletes, we're just depending on that quad, right? That thigh to move us in that direction. We're not even thinking about what other muscles we should be engaging in order to do a very simple daily functional movement. And that's something that we've never been taught that. And maybe as children, we might have done that movement correctly, but it wasn't imprinted on our brain that this is how this should be done.
The sitting down really does.
The sitting down.
Yeah, the sitting down.
Glute
right.
amnesia.
Glute
basically,
amnesia.
glutes
Sitting
are
down.
like, they just fall asleep. They're out for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, that's why so many work environments have like walking desks and things like that to try to get those, to battle against that from happening. One of you kind of touched on it was like the intermediate athlete versus advanced athletes. And like, if you look at somebody, like, look at me, I'm not a big guy. I'm 175 pounds, roughly 175
Can we get the
pounds,
scale out?
And I don't look very big, but because I know how to use my muscle recruitment pattern effectively, I know how to drive more force. So therefore, even though I'm not a very big guy, I can still lift pretty heavy, because it's not my strength, quote unquote. It's my technique, and my technique lends to that motor recruitment pattern.
Right. It's recruiting all of the muscles that could potentially help you with a lift, as opposed to predominantly and only using your quads in a squat, which is another movement we see a lot of people neglecting, the glute engagement.
I remember back in a long time ago, 10 years ago, I remember deadlifting, like, it was like 475 or something like that. And it's one of the coaches, big guy, 6'4", big and I out deadlifted him. He's like, how'd you do that with your scrawny legs? At the time, I didn't know. I was like, well, I guess I'm just strong from my body. I don't know. But I didn't realize that, it was a long time ago. And what I learned over the course of coaching and all the education that we've gone through, it had nothing to do with my strength.
No.
Nothing to do at all with my strength.
No. It remembering the appropriate muscles in the appropriate manner with good technique.
I call it like skinny strong, right? You ever like I remember one of my childhood friends, he was a skinny twig of a guy, but boys would wrestle. And I was like, how's this skinny dude always beating my ass? and it makes sense. He just know how to use his body, his muscle recruitment better than I did.
When you see it, we see smaller athletes on the world stage. You will see smaller athletes on the Olympic lifting stage out lifting much larger, sometimes much more famous athletes. And it's because technique, it's because, that neurological connection there,
Yeah.
proper engagement of all of the muscle groups involved in a clean or a snatch and that jerk. The more that you train the neurological connection, the more that you and speaking of that, also the more that you rest it. So we talked about Olympic lifting,
Oh, touch
and
on
that's
that.
one of the
Yeah.
main things that one of our coaches here has drilled into our athletes. This is, our gym, and this is something I'm very both surprised by and proud of, is when I'm coaching and it's a heavy lift day or a max lift day, or we're just building to a heavy set of 3. This is, I think the first time this is a testament to our culture that I don't have to force most of our athletes to sit down and take a break. We have
Yeah.
one coach in our gym, and he has really drilled that home where the minute they stop lifting, they rack the bar, they're sitting down. They're on the ground, they're on the box, and I turn around, I'm like, wow, this is
Yeah.
awesome. And I've several times taken photos of athletes just sitting down, and everybody's like, why is that impressive? I'm like, because you don't know how hard we fight to get people to rest.
Yeah.
To rest that CNS between lifts on heavy days, because everyone has this now idea from a lot of different methodologies that every single day you have to be moving at 80 to 100% for 45 to 60 straight minutes. Otherwise, you're not working out. You have to
Yeah.
feel like you can't breathe. You have to be sweating so much that you've created your own small tub of water, right?
Yeah.
Or you're not actually working out. And it's funny because you see in so much of the data being put out, there's this whole other group of us saying, guys, resistance training, that's what's going
Yeah.
to preserve those joints. That's what's going to keep you functional throughout your lifetime. Yes, cardio is important, but we need to train these muscles. We need to build up the joint support to be able to keep getting out of the chair.
Well, and what we're training there is the CNS.
Right.
The CNS, the central nervous system. So when we're under heavy loads and we exhibit a 1 rep max, 3 rep max, 5 rep max, you can we tell you to sit down, because while you're standing up, your body's not resting as it should. One of the points that was said was, if you slow down a video of somebody standing there after a lift, if you put it in real time, they're standing like this. But if you have a slower frame rate, you can see the subtle movements of the body happening, right? And what's happening there is that's just CNS really trying to give itself a break. So sit your ass down and give yourself a break.
Right. So it's you're not having to keep yourself upright on top of recovering from all the work that you just
What's
did.
happening there is your brain is trying to send these signals to your body to do whatever it is that your brain's telling it to do. And when we are under stress, specifically after our post lifting stress, that's the central nervous system needs a break. And the best way to do that is sit down.
Agreed. Yeah. And we talk about this, the CNS, the connection during heavy lifts, but that applies through all of CrossFit and through much of the fitness world. Let's just look at 2 other movements that we had recently in the open, the wall balls, which we will never forget. Okay. And kipping pull-ups or onto the chest to bar, onto the muscle ups. It's not just building the ability to lift heavy, it's increasing your skill at timing and rhythm. Okay, so for that wall ball, yes, we're coming out of the bottom of a front squat essentially in an explosive manner, and we have to look at the targeting of throwing that ball up to the proper line and then catching it and sinking at the right time, because you're not going to catch the ball, or you hopefully aren't catching the ball and then thinking, okay, now I'm going to go back down to my squat. You're also hopefully not already halfway into your squat catching the ball. It's also very inefficient. So you're looking at the timing of each of these more dynamic movements, and then looking at the kip when you're kipping in a pull-up. If you're not timing that kip properly, if you're not creating the great shapes, that hollow, and I would say Superman shape, while you have your hands on that bar, that movement becomes inefficient. That movement becomes unsustainable for more than a couple of reps, 5, 10, 15 reps. And suddenly you're doing one at a time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point with this. When we stress out, when we go under fatigue, our CNS is basically being tortured So what ends up happening there is that if you take somebody who's, let's go back to the muscle up. You say take somebody who's relatively new at doing muscle ups, they may be able to do 2 or 3 in a row, and then over the course of a workout, they get down to singles and then failures because it's a lot of strength that's probably being depleted. But more importantly, is that you're being under fatigue, so your brain is trying to send signals to the muscles to work, but they're fatigued. The CNS is done. So it's like it needs a break. It needs a rest.
No longer responding. And I think that comes down to the reasons why everybody these days is much more likely to, when you practice a clean, a jerk, a squat, when you go to do the pull-up, you go straight to the barbell, you go straight to the pull-up bar to do all this practice. So you're already at this minimum intensity level, and we're trying to practice and perfect a movement. And by the time we get to the higher intensity of adding the weight, or 3, 2, 1, go, let's string together, larger amounts of pull-ups, the CNS is already taxed. So this is why we bring that intensity down. So a lot of times we are, especially in our gym and hopefully in most CrossFit gyms still, you're practicing these movements with a PVC. Much lower intensity. There's no load there, right? So we're perfecting and we're practicing without inducing that fatigue that's going to create the inability for the muscles to respond to what the brain wants them to do. The same thing with a lot of times especially, in our warm-ups, we'll do something called hollow to Superman. We have another athlete that calls it roly-poly-olies.
I like the roly-poly-olies.
We've got athletes on the floor, and they start in a hollow body position, and we have them flip over into a full extension or a Superman position, similar to when you're on the bar, the pull-up bar, switching and creating those shapes. So that's the practice there, is we're creating those shapes and switching the position of our body without the tension on the arms, right? Without taxing those shoulders. So we're teaching the body to do it without as much intensity. And that's how we prevent overtaxing the CNS while we're practicing, so that we can get to the higher intensity. We can start doing the heavier loads.
It's a whole point of, as coaches, when we have a class going on and we get to the skill portion, where we're doing points of performance, we're breaking down layering. We're layering movements where we're doing all these different things to kind of go from, let's take a I don't know, let's take a clean. All right, let's take a clean, right? So we go with like a deadlift shrug to pick your burger in a warm-up variation you want to do. But each element of that is teaching your body how to apply force through different motor recruitment patterns. And we go at the basics and then develop into a larger succumbed movement. And what ends up happening is, not to get back into when that 3, 2, 1 go happens, but I can tell you that if you focus, if you get to a level where you kind of understand how your body moves under stress, under fatigue, like for me, like when it comes to a clean, if it's a heavy clean for the workout of the day and my heart rate's jacked up, I just think of one thing: a deadlift shrug. Because at this point, my body's so fatigued, I'm not thinking about yanking the bar off the ground. I just want to get that barbell past my knees and get it up to my shoulders.
Up to your shoulder, get that initial pull, as we like to call it, where it's actually not really a pull.
It's back to the basic of it, right? It's back to the basics of it, right? So we're doing wall ball shots. Our legs are fatigued. We're throwing this ball up. We don't want to use our arms more than we have to. So when I focus on squeezing my butt, squeezing my butt, as I bring the ball up. So if you're under fatigue, my point of advice here is think of the most basic movement pattern that we taught you during that skill session. Focus on that, and that usually get you through.
I think you focus on just remembering the initial cue. Just stand up. That's all you got to do. Just stand up. If you're on the rower, straighten your knees. It's 100%. Some of the most basic things you can do to help battle that fatigue. I've heard there's other things. Have you tried smelling salts, Mertz?
Yeah. I've done them. I'm not a huge fan of them. I've missed lifts because of it, so I'm good.
That was actually a joke. I didn't actually think you'd done that. Okay, never mind.
I've missed lifts because
one of these days we're gonna publish your Al Mertz, the Keith Richards of CrossFit, is still around today to teach others a better way.
Smelling salts can help. I think what happens there is that it fires your brain off to help send signals to the muscles that's trying to happen. It'll give you this rush. It does. It gives you a huge rush. like I said, maybe if I'm doing like deadlift, bench press, back squat, maybe. But when it comes to a technical lift like snatch or clean and
let's
jerk,
be clear, folks. We are not endorsing the use of smelling salts for anybody in CrossFit on this podcast. That was a joke. Mertz was apparently very serious about it. Has lots of experience. I should have maybe had some smelling salts before we started the podcast. That might have helped.
Get rid of, do facial.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you do smelling salts and your facial structure will.
And you wonder why I call you the Keith Richards. There's a question here. Folks, thanks for joining us today. Please like, share, and follow. I'm Coach Tanya.
I'm Coach Mertz.
And this is the Affiliate Soapbox.
I should wear Keith Richards' outfit one day for a podcast.
You really should.